Good afternoon, Dog Nation. Jeff Sintel here. I guess I'm flying solo. Brandon Adams could not be with us. So that makes me QB1 for the day for another edition of Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. We're here in the Dog Nation World headquarters. We're going to talk about all things Georgia football, Georgia recruiting. We're going to talk about our top targets as always. We'll discuss those. We'll go through some of that online chatter everybody likes to check in on Georgia football. Also, we'll have our Before the Hedges six-pack segment, and we'll wrap things all up with a hurry-up segment where we try to pepper in as many Georgia football recruiting questions as we can from you guys in the final 5 minutes of our program. But let's get started with, I guess, the topic of the week. That is George Pickens. Pickens had a very successful debut inside Stanford Stadium, and we thought this would be a good time to kind of check back and rewind his recruiting story. Folks will remember he was committed to Auburn for ages, like 566 days worth of time. That would be almost like Georgia losing Nolan Smith on signing day. But on signing day, George Pickens, the five-star receiver who became the first five-star receiver, pure receiver Georgia signed since Marlon Brown back in 2009. And frankly, so far, folks, he's looking like a five-star receiver at least, or at least one should look like during their freshman year at Georgia. Had the big catches, the big explosive plays against Murray State. Made a couple of key punishing blocks against Vanderbilt as well. And Mr. Pickens is well on his way from the state of Alabama. Looking back at his recruitment is very interesting. Pickens was connected to Justin Fields for the longest time. Those two guys were on the same 7-on-7 team. That was Cam Newton's program every spring, and those two got to know one another. Well, when the word, Pickens was a guy, there were some issues about would he commit early, would he sign early, would he go late? Pickens went late, and I had the chance to speak with him at the Under Armour All-American game. Never really forget that moment, because Pickens comes in, and he's got his Auburn bands on. He's got his LSU bands on, and he also has some Georgia bands on. He told me that day, he told all the reporters there that Georgia had a shot. He said LSU had a big shot. That was actually the first name on his mind when he started rolling off contenders or challengers to that Auburn flip. He also mentioned Ohio State. One of the things I want to read you that he said there that day that's I guess it kind of looks back on what that recruiting looked like. When asked about why Georgia was in consideration for him, he had two big reasons. Number one was the play style. He said it is really just their play style, Pickens said. They can play with anybody. They're kind of almost like Alabama. You know how Alabama might be hot and cold, but you know for sure they can play with anybody. You can possibly be wearing a ring. You can go to the NFL. That's really what is in my mind right now about Georgia. I'm going to take you to the day he ended up flipping from Auburn and to Georgia. That was National Signing Day back in February. And lots of folks who cover recruiting were a little bit turned upside down by this one, to say the least. He didn't have the ceremony at Hoover High School. Most would think that would be a hotbed of Auburn fans. He had it at the Municipal Recreation Center in Hoover, Alabama. And when he walked into that center, he really didn't know what he was going to do. Some reporters that were on the scene have told me that the athletic director at Hoover High was telling some of the folks there that George really hasn't made up his mind yet, and that's when his decision was imminent. His family was on the phone with representatives from Tennessee and Georgia and Auburn, and he eventually chose Auburn. One of the things why is that he just associated Georgia and Kirby Smart's program with winning. It was a more advanced culture of winning. And then you look at maybe one of the other reasons why Georgia was in it is he really liked Cortez Hankton. He really liked what he had with him and that vibe. And those two had built a relationship for the longest time. And it's very funny how Georgia always went after that five-star target in the 2019 class, and it was Jaden Hazelwood for the longest time until it wasn't. And then Georgia ended up with his teammate on Cam Newton's 7-on-7 program. That would be George Pickens. They flipped him away from Auburn, and they ended up with one of the marquee flip signings of the class. Folks might remember that Georgia actually pulled the two five-star prospects out of the state of Alabama in that class a year ago. That was Clay Webb from Alabama and Auburn in December, and then Mr. Pickens in February. And I know folks right now are kind of thinking they're mighty glad Georgia was able to do that, and I got to give a hat tip here to my friend Mr. Adams. Brandon was the guy who has been pining for 5-star and #1 alpha receivers for over 2 cycles now. I kind of kid him, we kind of kid him here around Dog Nation that Brandon kind of spoke George Pickens into existence because he kept bringing it up over and over and chopping wood on the karma of that recruitment. Now he's a Bulldog. We're in #1. Going to be set to be Jake Fromm's favorite target for at least one more season. And let's face it, folks, he has the ability to go get a ball on anybody. Didn't have that burner speed. He was about a 4.7 guy. But he has incredible catch radius, and the coaches at Hoover High have told me they're the best that they have ever seen at what he can do. And to the point where Hoover coach Josh Niblett and Hoover offensive coordinator Jason Curvin have said, they told me it doesn't matter what George does at Georgia, how many balls he catches, how many of those viral catches he makes. Nothing will surprise them about what George Pickens can do on a football field. All right, that's our first topic for today. We went a little bit long there on George Pickens. Get a little bit of backstory about George Pickens and why he chose the Bulldogs. And again, that's a 5-star receiver for the Bulldogs in the 2019 class. As always, Before the Hedges every Wednesday is brought to you by those fine folks at Kroger. Kroger right now has a couple of things we want to let you guys know about. Friday and Saturday only, starting Wednesday, September 11th, you can download the coupons to save on select Pepsi varieties. They're only $4.77 for a 24-pack with a card and digital coupon on the Kroger app or on the website. You can redeem in stores on Friday and Saturday, September 13th and September 14th. Kroger folks, they do a great job supporting us and getting everybody ready for those tailgates, getting everybody stocked for those late summer, early fall activities. And I'm sure everybody will have their tailgates flush with lots of stuff from their local Kroger on Saturday for that noon kickoff for Arkansas State. Next up on Before the Hedges, let's take a look at our weekly top target segment. And that's where we go through who we feel are the top targets with mutual interest in the University of Georgia, the guys that we feel will most likely finish out the class in Athens for 2020. And taking a look at these guys, we should start off right at the very top, and it's no stranger to see a very familiar name there in the #1 spot. That would be the 5-star cornerback out of Scottsdale, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix. Folks don't know that Mr. Ringo hails from a program that has won 6 consecutive state titles in Arizona. Ringo and his SaberCats actually lost last weekend in a kind of a classic event that was in Las Vegas in that area. Big event for a lot of major recruits at Bishop Gorman High School. Arizona's reigning state champions actually lost that one to fall to 2-1 on the season. We spoke about Mr. Ringo last week on our program, and he is a guy that it certainly seems like his commitment timeline is to be determined, but most likely what we see there is a scenario that resembles him taking all of his visits and then making his choice at the All-American game out in San Antonio in January. He's also not an early enrollee. We've got some recent information on that. Ringo does not plan to enroll early, so the 6'2", 210-pound corner with 4.35 laser speed in the 40 won't actually end up with whatever program he plans on signing up with until late May, early June type segment. Ringo is rated as the nation's #1 corner for 2020 on the 24/7 Sports Composite. #2, familiar name. I'm going to roll right through a lot of these. Noah Sewell, that's out of Orem, Utah. Noah's still bouncing back off of a foot injury. They've been wanting to keep him on the DL and let him rest and recuperate for region play. Orem High School has its eyes on a big state championship push in the class for this 2019 season, and they're looking to keep him healthy for the stretch run for region play. Noah Sewell is a guy that, much like Ringo will be at Georgia on an unofficial visit, most likely for the Notre Dame game, and everybody can count on seeing Noah Sewell in Athens for his official visit for the Notre Dame game next weekend. That's going to be a bonkers list. I'm kind of thinking right now that will be the biggest recruiting list that Georgia has ever put together even including some of those classes that had Nolan Smith, Jaden Hazelwood, Justin Fields, Owen Papo, Trayvon Walker, where it seemed like there was a dozen five-star prospects on the field checking out the Bulldogs that day. Third up on our list, it's a name everybody knows as well. It keeps moving up. The gentleman from Las Vegas, Desert Pines, Nevada. That's Darnell Washington, 6'7", about 256. Nation's #1 athlete. He's a five-star athlete. Kind of plays all over for Desert Pines. He's their punter. He's a three-technique defensive lineman. He's a wide receiver flexed out. He's a tight end, of course. He had another great game last weekend as well. Number 4 on that list is another five-star prospect Georgia fans have gotten to know quite well. That is the defensive end, the five technique, the very savvy defensive end, Jordan Birch out of Columbia High School. That's at the Hammond School. Something to pay note of about there with Mr. Birch. As we kind of wondered with a lot of those rumblings last week about was Jordan Birch going to make it to Clemson for the Clemson-Texas A&M game. Mr. Birch did not make it there to Clemson to Death Valley to check out the Tigers versus the Aggies. So that sets up a very interesting scenario. Look at next week. Will Jordan Birch make the trip to Athens? Will he be there on an unofficial or an official visit to Athens for that Notre Dame game? If so, if he makes that trip to Georgia for that 8 o'clock kickoff, that's some more momentum for Birch and the Bulldogs. He was last in Athens for the cookout weekend between the dead periods on the last weekend of July. Next up on our top targets, we've got number 5. That's as in a five-star. That's five-star running back Zachary Evans. Man, we could do a whole show about the yin and the yang and the ups and downs of Zachary Evans' recruitment. He's been off social media. He's back on social media again on his Instagram account. Zachary Evans is the nation's #1 running back for the 2020 class. I thought it was highly interesting last weekend when reports came out of South Florida that Dell McGee was down in South Florida checking out Miami running back, the Miami running back commit, the 4-star nation's number 6 running back Don Chaney Jr. out of South Florida. And this is about time where I'm gonna call beyond the glass. And Connor, you and I rap back and forth a lot about this, but this is probably way overdue in the program where Brandon starts chirping about saying, I'd have that guy a little bit higher, Jeff. I like that guy a little bit higher. Connor, you've seen the top 5. If you were running the show playing point guard on top targets, what would your top 5 look like?
Well, can you hear me?
I got you.
You got you? Perfect.
I got you.
All right. Well, so looking at the top 5 here, I don't find a lot of nits to pick. If anything, I might move Evans even a little bit further down and maybe put a guy like a Theo Johnson in the top 5, or a Rick Gilbert, obviously, maybe even a Trevon Dexter, the Florida commit, just because yes, obviously you want 2 running backs, and Del McGee looking at Don Chaney last week does seem to indicate that was going to be the case. But Evans, I'm starting to get worried about him. The whole I'm on social media, I'm off social media, that doesn't seem like a very, sort of mature, wise sort of thing to do. And, having both of us spent a little bit of time, you obviously a little bit more, with Kendall Milton, that's a guy I personally feel pretty comfortable that he's going to be something at Georgia. And while he might not have the athletic upside that Evans obviously does, Georgia is more than set there. Whereas, that tight end position, they're losing Charlie Warner next year, losing Eli Wolf next year. It's going to be a lot of, new faces at that position. And as James Coley showed on Saturday, they want to get the ball to these tight ends.
Yeah, I like that take. I actually, this week, it's funny, you were in my brain a little bit there, Connor. Man, I thought about moving Evans down another spot, but then I thought I'd really give folks some Fred G. Sanford heart palpitations on that one, because they'd start wondering, what does it mean? Yeah. What are the tea leaves saying? What's going on? The other point Connor makes there that I would definitely agree with is that the needs factor there is Georgia, I think, has a bona fide consistent player in Kendall Milton. That's the big back that they're looking for. And I wouldn't argue with Connor's point there either, that what it means to me is that much more likely for Georgia to get 2 tight ends into the playing mix next year than it might be to get 2 running backs heavily in the playing mix next year as well. And that's just a need. And when I could kind of compare Evans on his social media. It's just not consistent. I can think back of Cedric Von Prawn. He told folks, "Hey, I'm out. I'm taking a month off social media." Mm-hmm. And Cedric Von Prawn, didn't show up on social media until like 35 days later.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those. If you know you can't keep yourself off social media, why even try and put that out there that you are?
Just don't say it.
Yeah.
Just don't say it.
So
we turn the page now, Connor. We got number 6 to chop up now. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. They're going to be some familiar names, and I'll tell you, folks, we've reached the part in this top targets where Georgia's not going to sign all these guys. They're not going to sign all the guys left. They have 16 public commitments for 2020 at this time, and some of these names, Georgia's not going to get every one. I mean, if you just do the simple math, 16 plus 10 is 26, but you got to remember Georgia took 2 graduate transfers in the 2019 class in Eli Wolf and Lawrence Cager. So that automatically means that those are 2 less slots in 2020 that Georgia can sign for scholarships, especially trying to get those guys under the 85. Let's move on to number 6, and I think we're going to start talking about some Canadian bacon here. That would be Theo Johnson, the nation's number 1 player out of Windsor, Ontario. He was at Penn State last weekend. Theo will be at Georgia with his family on an official visit, huge, crucial official visit to check out Georgia for the Notre Dame game. And folks, Theo's going to make his moves. They're all bunched in so tight right now for him. It's kind of like a Talladega turn that Theo's going to make his moves based on the aftertaste and the feeling coming out of a lot of quick hit visits. He's got Georgia, Notre Dame in September. Then he's going to check out Iowa. That's a program that's known for putting tight ends in the first round. Just look what they did last year in the NFL draft. They've got Michigan and Penn State there as well. He's going to go back to back to back in October with a lot of rapid fire visits, and he wants to see which one just kind of resonates with him as the best vibe and the best visit. Todd Hartley, the tight ends coach at Georgia, has had a strong and sustained relationship with Theo Johnson. Goes all the way back to the May of 2018, summer of 2018, when Theo was auditioning for a scholarship at Miami, when Todd Hartley was the position coach for tight ends there. Very interesting first meeting between Todd and Theo. Theo was moving around from station to station, and he did a broad jump, and Theo popped out a 10-plus foot broad jump. Todd Hartley looked at him, and he was like, "Wow, what's your name, son?" And he said, "Theo Johnson." And he said, "Well, nice to meet you. I'm the tight ends coach here at Miami." And it's funny how things have grown. One neat little story about Theo and Todd Hartley is when Todd Hartley was no longer at Miami and he was trending or in line for a future job, especially the job at Georgia, Hartley told him, wherever I land, I'm going to recruit you because you're the type of player I want to be in my tight end room at the college level. And Hartley, according to Theo, even told him that things are looking pretty good for me at Georgia, so I can't wait to try and recruit you there to join me in Athens. That was even before he was officially announced, and that's kind of how that bond has been built between those two. Moving on to number 7. Number 7 on our top targets list is Elias Ricks out of Bradenton, Florida. LSU commit, mind you, but there's a close connection there. He goes back with Kendall Milton a long ways. Those two guys grew up in California together as schoolboy all-stars. They started playing together, and for the longest time, they had hatched out that dream that both of them wanted to play together. Now, I want folks to think about this. That visit weekend for Notre Dame, I would not be surprised to see Elias Ricks in Sanford Stadium as one of those constellation of 5 stars there for that game. The nation's number 2 cornerback for 2019, that's Elias Ricks. Elias has now moved on from California. He's actually at IMG Academy there in Bradenton, Florida, a program which has been pretty good to the Bulldogs in the past. Currently the home of 4-star defensive tackle commit Warren Brinson as well. And side road there on Brinson has elevated his play considerably over the last 6 to 8 months. He was in the rotation as a junior at IMG Academy, but now Brinson is looking very strong as a top-flight defensive tackle prospect for the class of 2019. Brinson, as folks might recall, is out of Savannah, Georgia, kind of similar to that flight path for Nolan Smith to IMG. Brinson chose Georgia on his first real official visit after he got one of his first major offers. He camped at Georgia, he gets an offer, he goes to IMG, On his first college visit after his IMG season, he commits to Georgia at the Georgia Tech game. Then he backs off that commitment. Then he recommits to Georgia in the class of 2020 as well. And with Georgia just losing Jamil Burroughs over the last week in the class of 2020, Brinson's place in this class sure seems a lot more secure. Next up on top targets, we're going past Elias Ricks to number 8 on the list. Number 8, we've got Zacchaeus Walker. Zacchaeus Walker will be in Athens on an unofficial visit for the Notre Dame game. He plans to be there for an unofficial. And Zacchaeus Walker's an interesting story because he told me recently that he's planning his official visit to Georgia for that weekend after the SEC championship. That's that gala weekend. Those are those prime recruiting weekends before the early signing period in mid-December. And let's just say this, that those weekends have been awfully good to Georgia in the past. Zacchaeus Walker out of Schley County in Ellaville, Georgia, actually has the ability to enroll early. Should he choose Georgia, he's one of those guys that would be able to enroll early in January of 2020. Next up on the list, how far will he go? We got number 9, Gervon Dexter. Man, this guy has some impressive senior film already coming out of Florida in Lake Wales. Nation's number 6 defensive tackle, I would believe. He was at the opening. I saw him just run through guys kind of like Zamir White through some Murray State defenders this past weekend. Dexter is a Florida commit. Just wait on that one and watch that one, because I think with what Georgia could put together on the defensive line, aside from Jalen Carter, I don't think there's no better player for the defensive line, at least the interior of the defensive line, that could come in and play early than what Gervon Dexter could give Georgia right out of the box. Now, I realize that Jordan Burch is higher rated. He's a 5-star. He's a defensive end, not more of an interior 3-technique type guy, which is Mr. Dexter can be. Just wait and watch that one. I think the better Georgia does and the more hardships that Florida encounters across the 2019 season, I think that's going to bode well for Georgia in the long run. Connor, we got one more left, man. Who do you think's coming in on number 10?
I mean, if BA were here, I think he'd be asking a lot of questions about a certain big-bodied, physical pass catcher out of the Marietta area and where he might be on this list. You talked a lot about Johnson and Washington earlier, and Gilbert could play tight end at the next level, but right now, based on your reporting and stuff we've heard, it kind of seems like he maybe wants to just be a wide receiver, which, you know, he's certainly big enough and physical enough to handle that and has the agility to make it work. But I think not seeing him on this list makes you wonder, okay, what does that say about where Georgia's putting in their efforts, and, you know, do they want to take certainly like a best player available in Gilbert, or do they want guys who are going to be sort of that tight end, hand in the dirt kind of mold guy?
That's right. And well, let's do this. Let's act like Richard Dawson or Steve Harvey today. Let's do Survey Says. Number 10 on the list. Who do we have here on our top targets list? Who's coming in at number 10? And that is the 5-star out of Marietta. Some information on Eric Gilbert that's coming out. I think Rivals.com has reported that Gilbert has changed his visit plan. Gilbert will be making his unofficial visit, for the Kentucky game. I think is Georgia's homecoming Kentucky, or is it Tennessee? I think it's Tennessee.
Well, they're at Tennessee. So.
Yeah, they're at Tennessee. So homecoming is actually a good point. Kind of hard to do homecoming, even though the fans take over stadiums. Kind of hard to do that. So homecoming would be Kentucky, and that's when he's planning to make his Georgia visit. Mr. Gilbert was also at Clemson over the weekend for that Clemson-Texas A&M game. I'd look for him to give that school an official visit as well. I think Tennessee going to need to hike their britches up there. I think they've got big problems in that program, much less the fact that they've got to make sure they continue to have a whiff or a strong whiff of Gilbert's interest. I think the two major players right now for Eric Gilbert would be Alabama and Clemson. I don't know the order. I don't even know if Gilbert knows the order. But I think those two schools are the ones that seem to be trending right now for Mr. Eric Gilbert. He will not be at Georgia for the Notre Dame game that weekend. And boy, Connor, that certainly says something when you've got Washington in on official, Johnson in on official, and then Mr. Gilbert not in on official or not even at the marquee game this year for Georgia.
So if I could do my best BA impression here and do a little tinfoil conspiracy theory, this might, if you were still wanting to see Gilbert in the class, it might be a good thing that he's not at that game, just given, there's only so much of Todd Hartley to go around. He can only spend so much time with Washington and Johnson. And it looks pretty clear that Georgia wants to take two of those guys, and they're not going to be able to take all. So with that in mind, maybe Gilbert being that third guy, maybe he gets the whole week to himself, and Georgia can really hash out with him one-on-one where things stand with him at that point, instead of giving well, we got three guys here, we can only really talk to two of you at this time, and sort of make it a little less awkward. But if I were also BA, I think he'd also be saying, can Tennessee get back in there and get involved again? Because he really doesn't want to see a player of Gilbert's caliber go to an Alabama or a Clemson, who, let's be honest here, are much more likely to be competing with Georgia for titles than those volunteers.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be awkward? How would you spend up that time? I don't know, but this to me creates an opportunity that Hartley and Kirby Smart during that weekend, they got a lot of time to recruit before 8 p.m. And then the Sunday afterward with a bye weekend coming up as well. Folks don't remember that. The other huge, ginormous plus for Georgia when they're hosting all these 5-stars, and I mean an aircraft carrier worth of 5-stars to land inside Athens that weekend. And oh yeah, there's an off weekend that next weekend where it means a big chunk out of Sunday could be spent talking to the Sewells, talking to the Johnsons, talking to the Washingtons, potentially talking to the Birches, yada, 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 keep going down that list. A lot of their 5-star commitments will be there. What about the Ricks? Elias Ricks is a possibility. I'd look for Kendall Milton to be there as well, back for an in-season trip to check out Georgia. Does Zachary Evans make the Georgia game on his official visit, the Georgia-Notre Dame game? Be very interesting to see that. And also one more thing about Evans. Lots of folks like myself, I know you good people out there as well, will be monitoring your social media feeds, the news coming out of Houston to see whether or not Zachary Evans is playing this weekend in Houston for his North Shore Mustangs team as well. Connor, we've also got the other names, the honorable mention names to look at right there. We had to add a little bit more volume to the list this week because it just seems like there's a couple of things working on the back end for Georgia in this class. You got Jacoby Cowan there. You've got 4-star running back Marshawn Lloyd. You got 4-star running back Don Chaney Jr. Look at what Hedges is doing here this week. They're kind of hedging that bet on the second running back in the class. You've got Lloyd there, USC commit, Don Chaney Jr., the Miami commit. 4-star wide receiver Arian Smith, the track speedster, was at Clemson on that, checking out the Tigers for that Texas A&M weekend. According to reports, Smith did not leave there with an offer, and the longer that Clemson goes without offering Arian Smith, the more likely a chance I feel Georgia has to add him as a potential 4th wide receiver piece in the class. You still got Miami commitment Avante Williams there at safety. You got Ashad Johnson, another running back in that class. That's Cedric Von Pron's teammate out of Warren Easton High School in Louisiana. So got a lot of names there. We also kept Jay Hardy in there. Jay Hardy's going to give Georgia an official visit. I think Jay Hardy's visiting Georgia Tech this weekend as well. Going to be a little more free-flowing with our show. Not going to be as scripted and segmented. I want to take some time here to jump into YouTube and catch a couple of questions after our top target segment. Elite GB wants to know where's BA at. Hey, GB, Brandon couldn't make it to the show today. He got called away. Let's call it a special duty, special assignment to take care of there. Brandon, I don't know if he's trying to find the pass rush for the Atlanta Falcons, Connor. Is he trying to find a little bit more fantasy points for Julio Jones? Maybe Chuck Smith's got him working on a swim technique.
I've heard fantasy. I've heard he's looking for touchdowns for the Falcons. I've heard, he could be going up to Canada, maybe go to Houston. Who knows where BA is, but he unfortunately could not be with us here today on the show. So we're doing our best to fill in.
Some instant YouTube feedback from our top targets. Crow King 123 says, if we get Washington, I don't care. Everybody wants to know is where's BA? Where's Eddie? Did Eddie take him on a recruiting trip? Crow King 123 is already thinking he went to Texas for a special announcement. Let me see. Graham Dog knows his Iowa tight end history. Good job there as well. Let's see. Going through. Got some people. We're talking about Brinson, Crow King, another spot on this chat. He said he knew he'd be well tested by the time he comes to Georgia and enrolls early. Brinson's another early enrollee. That's what they do there for folks coming out of ING. Crow King, wondering about Timothy Smith and Dexter as well. Tramdog reaches out. He says, just recruit Gilbert at wide receiver, then take Washington and Theo. Case closed. Real Cage, hey man, what's up? How are you, sir? So there we go. And Crow King also weighs in that, to be honest, he likes Rosemy as a true number one for this class. Folks, don't sleep on Justin Robinson. We dropped some of his senior film, early senior film, in the Dog Nation forum earlier this week. That was some reps of him. I put it in the Hurry Up Intel thread that's popping up and down on the Dog Nation forum. Lots of folks were pleased with what they saw out of Mr. Robinson, the 6'4" receiver out of Eagles Landing Christian Academy. So one of those rare in-state homegrown Bulldogs for the 2020 class. As always, so there you go, folks. There's your top targets. And what also is a top target right now for anybody in their shopping list would be Kroger. You got to think about those fuel points. Fuel points offer you more ways to save at your local Kroger. You receive 4 times the fuel points with purchase of your gift cards with a digital coupon from Kroger. Get in that app, get your fuel points, and then you'll be able to make a lot of cross-country travels or in-state travels, checking out 2020 recruits, 2021 recruits, and 2022 recruits, just like I did over the last week. I got a chance to see a couple of guys this week. One of the guys I want to talk about first and foremost would be Jaden Thomas, 4-star receiver. And here we go again, Connor. We've got another gem of a recruit out of Pace Academy. Thomas rates as the nation's number 24 wide receiver for 2021. He is, I think, one of the top 150 players. He just took back-to-back trips, back-to-back visits to catch a lot of that Alabama love. He was at Alabama Duke at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and then he went to Tuscaloosa this past weekend to check out Alabama versus New Mexico State. Got to speak to the GOAT of GOATs when it comes to coaches. That would be one Nick Saban. Nick Saban told him, and I kind of believe him here, Nick Saban told him, we're about to graduate or we're about to lose a lot of receivers. Hint, hint, Jerry Jeudy. Hint, hint, Devonta Smith out of their 2017 recruiting class, and there will be openings for wide receivers like him. Folks, go check out the piece on Jaden Thomas on dognation.com. We put it up there earlier this week. Plays everywhere for Pace Academy. He gets about 110 snaps a game. He's also a pro or college baseball prospect. He's got skills, some of those Bo Jackson type skills with the bat, cracking homers, 6'2", about 205 pounds. He plays all over. He's about as indispensable to the Pace Academy team, wearing as many hats as Connor Riley does here for Dog Nation. See if I can get them all. Wildcat quarterback, kick returner, punt returner, impromptu cornerback, situational pass rusher at defensive end, wide receiver, safety, just does about everything. Coach Chris Slade told me something that's going to stick with me for a while. He called him perhaps one of the most reliable players they've had at Pace Academy. He puts Mr. Thomas right lump square in that same category with Andrew Thomas, with Jamari Sawyer, with Trey Blunt. He does a lot of those same things. Kirby Smart has already started recruiting him by saying, Trey fits in, Andrew fits in, Jamari fits in. You can be another guy just like those. And he told him that the Georgia program needs players that can take care of their business on the field and in the classroom from such a prestigious high school like Pace Academy. Lots of stuff to talk to you there about Jaden Thomas. But folks, here's the one that blew me away. When he's working out, when he's grinding, when he's getting ready on his hype playlist before the game, he's got Let It Be by the Beatles on his playlist. Folks, that song came out in 1968. I don't think any receivers anywhere were listening to Let It Be by the Beatles when they were working out, where they were lifting in their weight rooms, in their sweat boxes way back then. He likes the song, and get this. This is a great quote from Mr. Thomas. He said, the way they get in and out of the tones of that song reminds him of how he has to get in and out of his breaks as a wide receiver. He thinks about that song while he's running routes. He loves the melody. He loves the music, and it just relaxes him. Now, Connor, I got to talk to you about this one, man, because this is one of This is one of those stories that actually made me feel younger and made me feel cooler because I don't have Let It Be on any playlist I have ever had in my entire lifetime. That sounds like some of that music my mom used to listen to in the car when she was taking me to get a Happy Meal or something like that. Connor, instant reaction. What do you think about Let It Be from a elite wide receiver targets playlist?
So I definitely think it's an interesting choice. There are some, more upbeat, up-tempo Beatles songs to go with, but Hey Jude, I'm not a huge Beatles fan, but from what I remember, that is a very slow song.
Yeah.
So, I think it says that he's a different kind of recruit. He's not your typical, he's not going out there listening to Young Thug or Lil Durk or whoever that might be. But, we've seen before with these Pace Academy products, these guys don't necessarily march to the beat of the traditional drum. And, Andrew Thomas came from there. Started right away as a freshman at right tackle and has been a great prospect. And very likely now almost assuredly going to be the first offensive tackle taken in this year's NFL draft, assuming he comes out, given Walker Little of Stanford out for the year with a knee injury now. And Jamari Sawyer, another guy from that Pace Academy program, he's a guy came and got his first start at right tackle this past week, and as a guy who, I think is really, despite being a five-star product, has really opened a lot of eyes with how he's played this past fall. Trey Blunt is another guy who, not the greatest athlete in the world, he's no George Pickens, but he's found a way to contribute on this team and be a real player for this team, and I think that speaks a lot to the guys that come out of Pace Academy. And if you're a junior early on in your junior year, Nick Saban's talking you up, giving you a lot of hype, telling you how good you are.
Yeah.
I think that really speaks to how good of a prospect Jaden Thomas is.
One thing, and let me try this something. Okay, that's for you, Brandon, everybody out there. I'm working on my listening face right now with a proper listening face protocol for a Hedges show. I'm trying to get some reps in there on that one right there. But you know what he said to me that was very interesting? And the Pace Academy coaches, folks, they're very high on this kid. They're like reliable, explosive, dynamic. They compare him to some of the greats they've had at their program of late. And they told me a few stories. They said Andrew, the light bulb really didn't come on for Andrew, where he was a hard worker, get after it guy till his junior year. Mind you, that's the year Pace Academy won a state championship. They said they equate Jaden to a true self-starter like Jamari Sawyer was. Jamari would come in and eat and go to work and get better. And that's a good mindset to have. But on the subject of Sawyer, this is why I wanted to say this. Sometimes the ripples of recruiting, and I would call it you skip a stone across a pond and it leaves little ripples. Well, when Jamari Sawyer chose Georgia, Jaden Thomas was in that program. Jaden Thomas was watching. He did the calculus and he's like, okay, Jamari, level-headed guy, hard worker, backbone of the program. He had Clemson, he had Ohio State, he had Alabama, he had everybody. And he ended up choosing Georgia. And that made an impression on Jaden Thomas. Those were his own words he told me. And he said from that point on, he could see himself at home or fitting in at Georgia. And when you ask him about that now, Jaden Thomas was at the cookout, by the way. Jaden Thomas says Athens, he has a lot of Georgia folks in his circle. He said Athens just feels like home. And I know my buddy Brandon, as he goes CSI looking through comments, anytime he can read a recruiting story and the recruit mentions the word home into that, I think his ears perk up a little bit. So Jaden Thomas, a great story. If you haven't seen it, just check it out. That's what I like to do. I like to write about more of these guys and their height and weight, what they run the 40 in and what they're rated. Lots of good stuff there with Jaden Thomas, a guy that we've really been impressed with. And it's funny, they don't think he's fast, but Connor at 6'2", 205, when you're running a 4.63 laser, that's pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing with Pickens was no one would mistake him as a burner coming into college, but I know it's Murray State, but even against Vanderbilt, he had no issues getting open. And when you're that size, you can make those kind of catches. It's okay if you're not a Mecole Hardman type speedster.
Yeah. We got some folks weighing in. Sonia Prescott, thanks for being a top fan. Thanks for watching our show. She says, Pace athletes are good and smart, no pun intended. Yeah, and a lot of times if a guy's good enough and he gets the gold seal from Pace Academy as a guy that gets it, lives it, breathes it, does what's expected to him, and then does more beyond that. If a guy's fitting in at Pace and he has that talent level and those type of offers, seems clearly like a no-brainer that this is a guy that could help anyone, including the University of Georgia. Going to catch a couple more comments about Jaden Thomas. Jaden's a guy that if I had to put together a top targets list for Georgia in the 2021 class, I'd have Jaden Thomas on there. He'd be a guy that probably would rank, inside that top 10. He wouldn't be on the honorable mention list whatsoever because you look at Jaden, and he can do a lot of things, man. He could even be a safety. I watched him practice this past week. 98, 99 degrees, relentless effort, and he's got what he calls this mushroom top of hair. And I don't know if you guys saw the picture or seen some of those pictures we've got of Jaden Thomas, but any young man that can play 110 plays per game on a Friday night all over the place with a hair which he called a mushroom top and squeezing all that into that helmet, I tell you, that adds an extra degree of difficulty to getting a lot of big reps and everything for any program. One more thing, guys. We got a couple more segments to come up, but one thing I want to talk to you guys about now is one of Brandon's favorite parts of the show. It's called the online chatter. And I got an online chatter about something very interesting right now. It's going to be related to a 5-star offensive tackle that most people still try to write those stories about. Broderick Jones. Is he going to flip from Georgia? Can Auburn, can Miami, can South Carolina, can anybody flip Broderick Jones? Well, last Friday night, Georgia coaches, the dead period is lifted. Now it's a quiet period where assistant coaches can go out on the road. They can talk to coaches. They can watch the prospects perform on the field. They can check in on transcripts and evaluate them for scholarship readiness. Well, Sam Pittman was there last weekend at Lithonia High School checking out Broderick Jones, but it also allowed him a chance to check out another prospect. Let me let you guys know the name, Kelvin Usher. Now, Pittman offered Mr. Usher, 6'4" and 308 pounds. He offered him a preferred walk-on slot. 6'4", 308, a guard. And, Georgia took a couple of guys like that before, but Pittman really liked what he saw, and he saw him well enough to offer him a preferred walk-on slot. Now, Usher doesn't have any hard scholarship offers. He's got some nibbles from Central Florida, schools out of that level, but the fact that, first of all, folks, what I hear regarding Broderick Jones is dead set on Georgia. But if they were to take his teammate and sign him as a preferred walk-on in the class of 2020, that would be flip game over when it comes to Broderick Jones. And folks, that's just smart recruiting. You see a player like that you like inside the state of Georgia. Pittman has a couple of slots every year for preferred walk-on offensive linemen. He took triplet Broderick Bunkley out of Columbia last cycle as a preferred walk-on to join his offensive line. And I tell you, that's a way. You want to talk about 5-star insurance, get one of his good teammates to join you as a preferred walk-on into your program. If he's good enough and if he can look the part and play the part. And that's a way I think Broderick Jones is another reason why I don't see Broderick Jones, the nation's number 2 offensive tackle, ever flipping his commitment from the University of Georgia. Some of the things that can happen in recruiting, one thing we've not seen yet is Georgia and Pittman lose a commitment from one of their 5-star offensive line targets. Kelvin Usher, name to remember there as well for the class of 2020. One more thing, folks, from Kroger, I want to let you guys know about tailgating at Kroger. Kroger has great eats for every game this football season. Taste the triumph and get ready for the game with savings on 12 packs of Coke products for $3 for $11. They got those pork spare ribs to get on your grill for Saturday against Arkansas State. They've also have 12 packs of Coors and Miller Lite starting at $17.99 with your Kroger Plus card. Start shopping for all your tailgate and game watching parties at Kroger today. Now, folks, I'm going to be honest. We're getting to my favorite part of the program right now. We tee up Brandon and try to make him look a little bit foolish going off into the weeds for answers to our 6-pack trivia. Our guest picker today for 6-pack trivia would be Connor, Mr. Super Utility Man for Dog Nation. Connor the Conjurer Riley. Connor, are you ready to take on this challenge? Are you ready to, Brandon usually goes 2 or 3 for 6 on this thing, man. Are you ready to open up this 6-pack, sir?
I have a low bar to clear here with Brennan and where he usually is, but I gotta say, now that and I haven't seen these trivia questions, I'm pretty nervous. I can't do worse than BA here. I just can't.
Can't do worse. Please be sure to nitpick every question as well about, don't make me do math. Put them in alphabetical order, Jeff. Let's see, what else are some of the Brandonisms about him? Don't make me think. Don't make him go back into history. It was very tempting this week because of the man, the myth, the legend, Vince Dooley, to do a Vince Dooley six-pack. And I promise you, folks, that one's coming. That's what bye weeks are for. That's what off weeks are for. But right now, we have the Red Wolves of Arkansas State to talk about right now, Connor. Mm-hmm. And number one, we're going to go a six-pack. All 6 questions here are about the Arkansas State Red Wolves. Number one. See how much you've been paying attention, Connor. Which one of these Bulldogs has a sibling who played for Arkansas State? A, Tommy Bush. B, Lawrence Cager. C, Kyrus the King Jackson. Get well soon, buddy. George Pickens or Micaiah Tongue. What are you thinking, brother?
Well, before I answer, I just want to say Kyrus Jackson has been out practicing with Georgia, even though he's got a broken hand, and he was making some pretty incredible one-handed catches at practice yesterday. Not even using the club to balance his hand. I was really impressed by that. As far as the answer to your trivia question, anyone who regularly consumes Jeff Sentell content would know the answer to this because, as a perfect sort of tie-in to today's show, it was a player we talked about at the top of the show. I know for a fact that the answer to this question, Jeff, is one George Pickens. I'm going to go with D here. I'm not going to get drawn off sides.
Can you ring your own bell for that one, Connor? Can you give yourself a bell ring?
Let me see.
Connor, 1 for 1. 1 for 1. Strong out the gate, the young man. The New England Patriots fan. Strong out that gate, representing the pride of Boston. 1 for 1. Joel Moody, pretty funny line on Facebook right now. Who founded Arkansas State? Noah. Gotcha on that one. And folks, allow me to play ombudsman with our Before the Hedges show. I think during our Jaden Thomas segment, I mentioned the song "Let It Be." Well, he doesn't work out to "Let It Be." He works out to "Hey Jude." We're all about accuracy and factual and getting it right here on Dog Nation Before the Hedges. Don't want to have to put any corrections or editor's note at the end of our programs, so I want to make sure we get that right. Number one, Connor is 1 for 1. Which one of these Bulldogs has a sibling who played for Arkansas State? That is indeed George Pickens. His brother, Chris Humes, played for Arkansas State and had a cup of coffee with the Raiders in the NFL and is now, I believe, a Winnipeg Blue Bomber. Are they the Blue Bombers, Connor?
Yep.
The Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He's a pretty ball-out cornerback for Winnipeg in the CFL. And, folks, there's a great story we wrote about there with Humes and Pickens. He was manning him up and playing press man and knocking him around and stinging the fool out of him when he was 12 or 13 years old, getting him ready for his future in the game of football. Number 2 on our 6-pack. Let's crack open another one right here. Our second question is, Connor, what is the nickname of the Arkansas State Red Wolves mascot? Is it ASU, after ASU? Is it How? C would be Kirby. Wouldn't that be ironic, folks? D would be Red, or E would be Wolfgang. I think I've successfully went through the rope drill of all related animal puns here for the Arkansas State Red Wolves mascot. Connor, start breaking it down for me, man.
I will say, I'm pretty impressed by this. I'm going to cross off Asu, Hal, and Kirby. Those just don't really seem realistic. But having to choose between Red and Wolfgang, there are Reds out there, Morgan Freeman's character in Shawshank Redemption, I believe, is named Red.
+1 for that, by the way.
But I'm going to go Wolfgang here. They're the Red Wolves. Red Wolves doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I'm going to go with Wolfgang as my answer here.
Let me get a sincere listening face there to that one. Let me try out another one. This is like that guy from, what was that movie, 10 Things I Hate About You, the guy that was the toothpaste ad guy, or the guy that had the hemorrhoid cream or something like that, or sock ad. Joey, I think, was his name. If you've seen that movie, you're a child of the 90s, kind of just like me. But Connor. The correct answer. And let's see, Demetrius Isom has E. Jay Squillis has E. Kevin Lee says how. Edwina Atwood says Wolfgang. Tony Go Dogs, a top fan, says E. We got a lot of E's. A lot of people saying Wolfgang. Correct answer, sir? Hit that buzzer, man. The correct answer is how.
I gotta say, I think that's the wrong answer.
Sounds like a howl of a good name. 1 for 2 right there, and this is the part where Brandon would chirp in and say something like, "Well, they need to rename their mascot. They need to get a new mascot."
He wouldn't be wrong. He would not be wrong.
He wouldn't be wrong. Number 3, Connor, 1 for 2. So you're batting 500 right now. You're like Mike Trout in spring training. Number 3, the third one on our six-pack trivia is, which one of these is not true about the Arkansas State program? A, fans tailgate in an area known as the Pines. B, Howell actually has a friend-girlfriend mascot named Scarlet. C, the team was known as the Indians all the way up till 2008. D, the Red Wolves will play 3 games against Georgia schools this fall. Or E, all of the above are true.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure C is correct. I know at a point they were the Indians, and unless you're doing the whole, it was up until 2007, I feel like that one is true. I could see D being true as well. I don't know their schedule well enough, but I do know that Georgia State, who beat Tennessee earlier this year, and Georgia Southern are both also in the Sun Belt. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to cross them off. And because I know I'm pretty confident about both of these, I can rule out E as well. That leaves me with A, fans tailgate in an area known as the Pines, which, I'm sure there's some pine trees in Arkansas State, close to the Ozarks and whatnot. And then I keep looking at B. Hal actually has a girlfriend named Scarlet. And something about that just seems too fishy to me. I'm going to go with B. Hal having a girlfriend, a friend/girlfriend. We don't know the relationship status, obviously. Named Scarlet. I feel like that just feels maybe a little too far out there for Arkansas State.
That my friend, seems so corny Del Monte wouldn't can it. That seems very high on the cheese meter. It seems like that was just concocted for this show. But rolling through them. And by the way, thank you for that good viewer service announcement by alerting folks so they make sure they don't forget that Georgia State did beat Tennessee. I know we might slip some minds here right now, but thank you for making sure everybody knows what's going on. Had a question quickly from YouTube. Somebody wanted to know what position Jaden Thomas plays. Jaden is a 4-star wide receiver. That's what he wants to play in college and on Saturdays. But going back to number 3, Connor's on number 3 on the six-pack. He's smelling some cheese. He's smelling some corny. Let's go back to that question. The correct answer on our third one is, which one of these is not true about the Arkansas State program? I'm going to go through it. Connor, fans do actually tailgate in an area known as the Pines. B, Hal actually does have a friend-girlfriend mascot named Scarlet. C, the team was known as the Indians all the way up until 2008. And D, the Red Wolves will play Georgia State, the University of Georgia, and Georgia Southern this fall. So the correct answer is E. All of the above are true. Hal and Scarlet, first of all, the red hair, she's got to have red hair, right? Doesn't the Wolf friend have red hair? I didn't see a picture, but I did read that on their website and their media guide.
So Arkansas State theoretically has a chance to be Georgia State champs this year if they beat Georgia, Georgia State, and Georgia Southern.
Theoretically.
It's on the table.
Theoretically. And, there's also theoretically the chance that Jake Fromm will be playing in the fourth quarter on Saturday as well. All right, Brett. All right, 1 for 3. See, Connor is still a Hall of Famer now, still hitting 333. Number 4 in our six-pack trivia. Let me know how you guys are playing along as well. Tram Dog is 1 out of 3. Bama Boy considers Vandy a high school team. Great for education, but terrible in football. Good thought there. Which one of these major college head coaches, Connor, did not coach at Arkansas State during their career? A, you got Hugh Freeze, and reports have it that he actually coached for Arkansas State standing upright. not actually in a bed or anything else like that. B, Gus Malzahn. Did the Gus bus park itself in Jonesboro, Arkansas for a season or two? C, you got Ray Perkins, former Alabama coach, former Alabama coordinator, went on to coach for the Giants and the Jets in the National Football League. Or Chris Peterson, who's been around the ways. He's been at Boise State. He now has the reins on that Washington program. Side note, Washington and Jacob Eason lost last week to Cal in combat, in the Pac-12 combat. Eason didn't have the very best game. He was plagued by a lot of drops, but I digress. Connor, which one of those jumps out at you as the one that did not coach in Jonesboro for the Red Wolves or the Indians?
I know Hugh Freeze did. He was the head coach there in 2011 before taking the Ole Miss job. And then the very next year, Gus Malzahn, who has a lot of ties to the state of Arkansas, was the head coach there sort of 1 year in between his time at Auburn as an OC and then his time as Auburn's, before him being Auburn's head coach. So I can cross them off. Never heard of Ray Perkins. So that makes this a little difficult. But Chris Peterson, I know he's a Pacific Northwest guy, and because of that, I'm going to venture out and guess that he's never spent time in the state of Arkansas. So he is going to be my answer, D, Chris Peterson, and I fully realize that my youth might be the reason that I end up missing this question because I don't know who Ray Perkins is.
First of all, fact check him I want to fact check you guys in the audience. We got to know the audience. How many of you folks just say aye, just give me a thumbs up, give me a whatever. If you know who Ray Perkins is, if you remember those years in Tuscaloosa where people were actually throwing bricks through his window in the 80s because he wasn't calling enough great ball plays for the Crimson Tide. Everybody knows who Ray Perkins is. Just kind of let me know. Don't let me know. Say, I don't know the guy. I got a thumbs up from Realistic One. Got some action on that one from Jennifer Wheat-Rucker. She knows who Ray Perkins is. Timothy Burrow. Hey, Mr. Burrow, how are you doing today, sir? Hope everything's great up in Gilmer County. Dante Rivers, thumbs down. Winston Mock is giving you some grief about you don't know who Ray Perkins is. Jerry Lloyd knows, excellent wide receiver coach as well. Connor, you might have not known Ray Perkins, but you got the question right, sir.
There we go.
Ring your bells. You're now 2 for 4.
There we go.
On the six-pack. And whatever happens, Connor, these next two questions,
I've cleared the BA bar.
You should say, you know, Brandon, the time I was the guest picker on the six-pack, I did yada, 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 yada. So this is the point where Connor can get into rarefied air. He's already got an all-SEC type season here on the six-pack. Now let's see what else he can get. Number 5, Connor. Mr. Riley, your question is, true or false? Everybody's starting to compare. You know, Kirby Smart said this week, Connor, that Arkansas State has his immense respect. He has all the respect in the world. They got good players. Everywhere I look, good players. Everywhere he looks, good players. Well, they also played Vanderbilt this year. And Georgia did okay in Nashville with Vanderbilt. So this is a true or false. 50-50 shot here. Vanderbilt signed 73 prospects with a 3-star rating over the last 4 cycles. That's 27 more than the Red Wolves did. True or false? Or if you're the young kids, is that fact, fiction, or that popular game, fact or crap? Which one is it?
So if I'm doing the math here correctly, that would mean 46 3-star prospects, which seems realistic. However, knowing you and how you set up this game, this feels like a classic trap question where it's actually something like 26 or 28 more prospects than the Red Wolves have signed. So because of that, I'm going to say false.
So Connor has now pulled a classic reading the coverage Brandon Adams move. He talked himself through all that. Safety valve, look away the safety, inside leverage, check down. Connor, correct answer is a buzzer.
I overthought it.
So Arkansas State has 46 3-stars on their roster, but they also have another 49 prospects with a 2-star rating.
I'm just impressed I did the math right there and got to 46 3-star prospects.
You got 46. And, you know, I was kind of doing the math, too, because I thought maybe this will be a really trick haymaker question for some folks because, you know, Vanderbilt's still an SEC school, and to think they've got 76 3-stars on the program, pretty sporty.
Yeah.
Don't know where all those folks were against Purdue and Rondale Moore.
Ugh, they took it
Another side road. That Rondale Moore kid, wow. He's something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Georgia's signee, Corey Wren, Georgia's potential future signee, Corey Wren, can look like Rondale Moore on a football field, that would be Connor's going to take that one.
Yep.
Because, Rondale Moore looks like Mecole Hardman should have looked this year at Georgia, should he have returned. Number 6, last one on our six-pack, and usually the last one in the six-pack is the one you got to savor. And unfortunately, this is the time where I turn to famous people from Arkansas State University. But there are no famous people from Arkansas State University. But there might just be a famous resident of Jonesboro, Arkansas. Connor, true or false? Novelist John Grisham, who has slightly more money than Brandon Adams, is from Jonesboro in Arkansas. That's where this university is located. That's where the Red Wolves play. Do you think John Grisham hails from the home of ASU?
So I know John Grisham, through reading some of his books, I read The Firm, a couple of them. I know he is big on the city of Memphis. And Memphis is close to Arkansas. And I do know that Arkansas State is located in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I'm gonna say true because I said false on the last one. And I'm gonna say this one is true and this one is correct. I don't know if that logic makes a whole lot of sense. It certainly wouldn't pass BA's logic sniff test. But I'm gonna go true here. I'm gonna say John Grisham is from Jonesboro, Arkansas.
Connor Riley. Ring that bell, sir.
There we go. 3 out of 6.
Let's go, Connor Riley. Connor Riley finishes your six-pack trivia as a 500 hitter.
There you go.
Folks, everybody give Connor a hand. He steps in. He takes this live fire. Never seen these questions before. Never worked them out and processed all of these things, kind of like Brandon Adams does every week. Folks, also, I'm getting some questions on both YouTube and Facebook about where BA is. BA actually couldn't be with us today, so we had to hearken back to our old school days of Jeff and a squeaky screen door and flying solo here on Facebook Live and YouTube and also Twitter. But we've also got this fully loaded graphics machine studio powerhouse. Got Connor behind the glass being my wingman. I'm going to play Maverick. He's a good goose. Hopefully he doesn't die at the end of this show. But that's where Brandon is. I know some guys are asking. Before we get to our hurry up and our last 5 minutes on the clock, I want to remind everybody here about Kroger. Kroger starting Wednesday. That's September 11th. Start downloading your coupons to save on select Pepsi varieties. That's only $4.77 for a 24-pack with the card, with the digital coupon on the Kroger app or the website. Redeem in stores on Friday and Saturday, September 13th and 14th. You can take them out to your tailgate at Georgia for that noon kickoff against Arkansas State. One thing I wanted to mention, this momentum has kind of generated a lot of steam over the last 24 to 48 hours. I look at this weekend's game with Arkansas State and Coach Anderson and the tragic loss of his wife as an opportunity for anybody that's connected to this program or anybody that is around this program to kind of do more as a reporter, do more as a fan. Everybody wants to pink out or wear pink in honor of that cause and breast cancer. There's been a great movement on Twitter for Bulldogs Against Breast Cancer where they're encouraging everyone to wear pink inside Sanford Stadium on Saturday. Folks, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. You're going to see me in pink. Probably going to see Connor in pink at Sanford Stadium on Saturday as well. And then if Brandon likes the way it looks with his skin tone and his on-camera look with the white balances, I'm sure he will be wearing pink as well. I'm in pink today as well. We even turned the Dog Nation World Headquarters studio background pink because we can't think of a better way to spend some of this time, or we spread so much information across our channels. I think the best information we can spread this weekend about the Arkansas State game is put on something pink, support that family, support that football family, support that. You got loved ones, folks. Cancer sucks. I don't know anybody that's in this life that doesn't have a cancer story where it's hurt or really just devastated some family. So, folks, if you want to consider wearing pink, I'm sure that would be greatly appreciated for everybody out there. And with that's That's our public service announcement for this episode of Hedges. Start thinking about your pink outfit for Sanford Stadium on Saturday. And I know folks might think if they like to tell a joke or something like that, some of the colors of the Georgia red, especially in 107,000 degree heat, might look like pink inside Sanford Stadium. And with that, think about wearing pink. Let's put 5 minutes on the clock, and let's talk. Let's go hurry up. Philip Jordan Wells is noting that The Client was a good movie. Connor, some folks are impressed that you've read a couple of John Grisham novels. Did you read Time to Kill? Did you read Rainmaker? What else did you read?
I read Time to Kill, and I've read The Firm. Those are the only two.
Those are the most popular ones.
Yes.
Ro Hawkins has a question. Hey, Ro, thanks for coming around. Notori Johnson looked good Saturday. Do I think he gets more playing time? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And we were talking about Notori on the Dog Nation forum this week. I don't know how his career is going to end up, but I'll tell you this. Notori Johnson would be a great football coach one day at any level. Think of Notori's life. He's been a state champion. He's been an All-American. He was committed to Alabama. He came to Georgia. He dealt with a diabetes issue that cost him about 30 or 40 pounds heading into his freshman year at Georgia. He has had a position switch. He's had to deal with ups and downs of life. We've written that story about his jailed father, about how Notori went to visit him before he enrolled at Georgia. Great stuff. Notori has the best personality, always a smile on his face, and I think that could benefit young people down the road in the game of football. Great perspective from that young man. Kathy Aquavia Green, Arkansas State had 6 sacks versus UNLV. How will we match up? I'm going to say 1 sack, Connor. That sounds about right. Remember, Murray State got Georgia on one of those eye candy twists or stunts. But what they do to get past Georgia's offensive line, you're already seeing a script for how a lot of defenses are going to combat Georgia. And what they're going to do is they're going to have some trickeration with their offensive line. And sure, they can stunt and they can try to get home against the passer and try to get some second and longs and third and longs for Georgia. But a lot of those stunts end up leaving big gashes in their front for Georgia and Zamir White and James Cook and DeAndre Swift to exploit. Winston Mock has a question. Over, under on sacks for Nolan Smith this week. I say Winston Mock says 2. I think 1.5, 1 to 2 sounds about right. It depends on how much time he gets there in the game early on. Arkansas State will also want to get rid of the ball quick as well, not to have to deal with that. Tram Dog says Notori looked good, strong, and fast. Brian McPhail coming at me with the good stuff right here. He wants to know my best guess how many 5 stars Georgia gets in 2020. For me, it's went from 8 to 7 to 8, back to 7 over the last few weeks. I think this will be another robust class with those 5 stars. Elite GB, do folks sleep on Justin Robinson? Yeah, I think folks do sleep on Justin Robinson. Got to remember, his first year of high school, he had a fractured kneecap, didn't play. Second year of high school, he transferred to Eagles Landing Christian, had to sit out per GHSA rules. Third season, he was a 2-way starter, especially in the playoffs at corner and wide receiver. I think that young man is just getting into his zone, and he might finally be coming around to being fully healthy. He wasn't healthy during the camp season earlier this spring.
I have a question.
What you got, Connor?
So, someone earlier asked, why do you have Noah Sewell so high in your top targets ranking? And I can answer that. They do not make guys who move as fast as he does at 6'2", 265 pounds. That just does not happen. Georgia landing Nakobe Dean last year was a really big win for that program, pulling him out of Mississippi. A State, Alabama, and Ole Miss, obviously, have had a lot of success in. Mm-hmm. Georgia were to land Sewell from Utah. Again, he's got a brother at Oregon that is certainly going to appeal to him, and a lot of those Polynesian players tend to stay out on the West Coast or go to programs where there's been a history of Polynesian players. Where would Sewell be the greater recruiting win for Georgia compared to that of Dean?
I guess it would just I feel like it would be a Lewis and Clark recruiting. And what I mean is Georgia keeps expanding its territory. Like, first of all, it would be the first player of, strong Polynesian descent to choose Georgia. And I hear on the recruiting trail, Connor, a lot of those players, they like to look to play at a place where they've already welcomed Polynesian players, and Polynesian players have fit into the culture and had success. Alabama didn't get a lot of those guys until Tua Tagovailoa came to Tuscaloosa as well and started balling out. I think Georgia is in a good spot, a good to great spot right now with Noah Sewell, and he's going to be number 2. And folks, if Keely Ringo did not look like the perfect incarnation of a cornerback, and Georgia's going to have to go head-to-head with Clemson and Alabama over the next 3 or 4 cycles if they want to win those big things and those big trophies and those big rings. Noah Sewell might have been a 2 or 3 guy in last year's class, with even folks like Nakobe and even folks like Nolan Smith on the prowl right there. Noah Sewell is somebody we just haven't seen in recruiting. 6'2", 266. He's as fast and moves around as a receiver. Folks, I saw him be practically the most valuable player in the opening finals this year out in Texas. And he did so as an inside backer who should be terrible at that. Their game is best played in pads, and Noah Sewell was great in a shorts and slippers league where everybody just played 7-on-7. Noah Sewell is as fast in all the metrics as some wide receivers are, and he's 266 pounds. Of course, Georgia will probably try to, if he comes to Athens, Georgia will probably get him to be around 250 or 255. Folks, he's going to early enroll, and if he does come to Athens, if he goes to Oregon, if he goes to his 3rd official visit is Texas A&M, if he goes to any of those spots, he's going to take somebody's job really fast because college football does not have a lot of Noah Sewells playing inside linebacker. Very, very high on Noah Sewell. I don't think I'll ever see a player quite like him. I want to tell you one story. He was at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge. Inside linebacker, mind you, 277 pounds, mind you. 266 pounds, mind you. And he's catching punts one-handed. He has a ball cradled in this hand, and he's catching punts one-handed, just goofing off. He was running routes with the running backs. He was covering running backs. Noah Sewell, I saw him, a good look at him all that week out in the opening, and I said to myself, that kid is a 5-star. The industry is just waiting to crown him. He just doesn't know it yet. He elevated to become a 5-star prospect. Noah Sewell would be the nation's #1 inside linebacker and a 5-star inside linebacker in just about any cycle you want to rate him, any year, because he's that special of an athlete. Noah Sewell. And that was not a paid product endorsement. I don't represent Noah Sewell. I'm not going Jerry Maguire on Noah Sewell. He's just the type of player that gets me really excited about what he can bring anywhere in college football, including the University of Georgia. Justin Turner has a question. We'll crack out a few more for our Facebook folks. Wants to know, is today too early to start partying for the Notre Dame game? Probably not too early to start partying for the Arkansas State game. Might be too early to start partying for Notre Dame, because you gotta make sure you're aware and focused and dialed in order to read all this official visit, unofficial guest list coverage coming up on Dog Nation over the next 5 to 10 days. Connor, we did it, man. We took off, we went through the air, and we've got wheels down on another edition of Before the Hedges on Dog Nation. Want to give a quick shout out to the folks at Kroger for all they do to support our programs and our products here at Dog Nation. Think pink this weekend, Dog Nation, about wearing something in tribute and in support of those that are fighting and dealing with breast cancer and the effects it has on their families. Try to do more as a fan this weekend. I know I will try to do more as a reporter, as a writer, as a photographer, as a videographer, as a talking head with that Brandon Adams guy. Brandon Adams will be back on Before the Hedges next week. We look forward to seeing all of you on another Dog Nation time and another Dog Nation channel. For Dog Nation, I'm Jeff Sintel. Catch you later, folks.